Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session. Want to welcome everyone to our live webinar. So today we'll be doing the sound editing and design for video, which is really an exciting and fun part to look at. So we'll look at a lot of the reasons of why we do things and explore some of the software ways to do it. But yeah, just going through the techniques. So want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Tom Strnad. I'm the lead digital artist of the Creator Space, and welcome. So I want to thank all of our partners in this project. So we have the Canada Council for the Arts, and then we also have our library partners. So we have the Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, and the Wasaga Beach Public Library. As I put a note out here as well, the software, Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve Studio, there's a whole iMac designed for video editing that's available at the Blue Mountains Public Library. You can sign in. So if you're a Blue Mountains Public Library member, you can access the system. It's just part of the resources there through the Creator Space and with the Blue Mountains Public Library. So really want to welcome everyone to look at that option and explore things, especially over the next few weeks. If you find you have some time and you want to get into finishing some sound perhaps on a film or video that you've already finished, why not check it out? So just wanted to plug that and definitely check it out. And we'll have computers, iMacs coming to the Wasaga Beach Public Library and the Collingwood Public Library in the new year as well. So that's really exciting news. Okay, so let's start up on going through some of the ideas here. So today we will be looking at sound editing and design, and we're going to define that and just look at what do these things mean. Then we'll look at sound editing essentials. So what are the essential elements of sound editing? We'll look at dialogue editing, what that means, sound design elements, what makes up sound design for video. Then we'll look at some music editing concepts as well, and finally we'll have some time for a Q&A. So yeah, that's all the overview of what we'll be doing. So let's get right into it. So what is sound editing? So again, I want to really get into some of the concepts behind sound editing design before we dive right into the technical. So we really want to think about what we're doing and why we're doing it. That's really one of our one of our focuses for the webinars here. So sound editing is the process of refining, deleting, and or replacing existing sound, such as source recordings, to help enhance and to better tell your story in the film or video. So what does that really mean? So in terms of refining, this could be we're trying to make things improve things. So refining perhaps some of what's spoken. So in a narrative film, we could be perhaps getting rid of some of the lines. So let's say there's 20 lines spoken. We might want to remove 2 or 3 that we end up feeling aren't necessary. So that could be some of the sound editing. We can also refine things such as if there's a lot of ums or pauses or hits or clicks, tongue smacks. We can have clicks in the throat. So any of those things we could be refining. Deleting comes down to getting rid of the opposite side of tracks or getting rid of unwanted sounds. And then finally, the replacing is we can be putting whole different sounds into what was there originally. So when I refer to sync sound, and we'll define it a little bit more, the sync sound is what's actually recorded with the camera or the digital sound recorder. So that's that synchronous sound, the direct input of sound into the camera source. So that's always called source audio. And that's usually comes down to, if it's a documentary, that will come down to like your interview dialogue or your interview subjects talking in that voice. Then if it's a narrative film, it'll come down to the actors and their dialogue being recorded. And that's usually the sync sound. We're not creating any other sounds when we're doing the video production side. So music, sound effects, all that stuff's added after, like what we'll look at today. So we're really playing with sound editing. Is one of the first things is to really help refine and enhance that sync sound, and then adding more to it, which gets into more of the design elements. Okay, so sound editing is essential because this can help fix mistakes, such as the wrong words in dialogue. So if there's a script and then the wrong words are being used, that could be really important. If someone says up and they're supposed to say down, and that can be fixed. And remember, in picture editing, we can also cut away from someone. So if there's two actors talking, we have something called coverage, and we're not seeing the person, we can replace things like that. So in case all of a sudden it has to be down instead of up, or vice versa, that can be fixed and replaced. Then also things like a loud truck going by, unwanted sounds. So usually there's a lot of clicks and hits, and this can happen. And I'm wearing a wireless mic, and that's something that could happen as well. That maybe I hit my wireless lav or something, and then it's a big click, and we want to get rid of that. So those kinds of hits can happen on the mics, and they can also happen with hitting a table, knocking into something from outside. So we can get rid of most of those things. And we think about sound and video. In video, things are frame based, so we can really go down to that single frame and try to figure out, can we get rid of that one spot that's causing a problem? Then the other thing, sound editing can also be used to replace different takes within a desired picture take. So what does that mean? Let's say if I'm saying hello, and when I say hello, and when I say hello, I want to maybe use the more excited one, the hello. So I might want to put that into the picture, because when I said it more excited, maybe in that take, the person was out of focus. So you're trying to change. You can help, augment performances with different takes of words. And as long as it's matching up with the lips, that's the key thing. But we can replace words. Again, there could be a hit over the word, so we're trying to just find an alternative take. There can be a performance thing where we're trying to change a performance where maybe the actor's happy and then they get sad by the end, but we want them to just stay happy throughout. So this is a pretty common thing with sound editing is replacing takes. Now, this kind of comes back to, the people out there, if you're, when you're producing your videos as well, always think about getting at least a couple of takes, because you never know if maybe the first take has some unwanted sounds. And if you have multiple takes, you'll have more options in the sound editing. If picture takes become an issue, you don't have time for that, then we have to get into things like replacing the dialogue. So you can re-record dialogue, or do like an automated dialogue replacement, or ADR, into bring that into the loop so that you can actually have the actors say their lines again, and then fix it that way. But generally, if you have a little bit of time, I always recommend do a few takes, because it will really help in the editing, both picture and in sound. So that's my big recommendation. Okay, so that's sound editing defined. So that's great. We got that idea across. So it's not picture editing. We've already determined what the picture is. Now we're just trying to enhance what is told in the video. I want to make that clear as well. Okay, so what is sound design? So just like sound editing, sound design is kind of that next step where it's not just the editorial, but now we're trying to create a designed soundscape. Now this can apply for video, but it also applies to other areas and other mediums. So this could work in audio podcasts. It can work in creating soundscapes for, let's say, spoken poetry, for some sort of a photography online video, and you want to put in some soundscape, or even for a gallery show. Let's say you want to have background soundscape. So sound design can be used in many, many elements, presentations and so on. But we're going to talk about it in the video side, but I do want to mention it can be used for other things. So feel free to use these concepts in other mediums or other arts projects that you're exploring. So sound design, just like visual design, is the concept of using specific sounds to create a certain feeling, environment, or style of sound. So, what does that really mean? And, again, it's called design. And if you think about visual design, when you're doing, the actual production, or if you're doing visual arts like drawing or something, that's the same idea there, is that we can think of the design, like what colors and what kind of production design, what kind of wardrobe are the actors wearing, that kind of idea. So the same thing applies to sound design. What kind of tone is it? Does it sound bright and happy? Does it sound dark and mysterious? And this is with sound effects too. So you can imagine, I always say, if you take one of the scariest films you ever watched, and if you have the sound off, all of a sudden it's not that scary, because the sound design creates that other level. So, this brings us to that interesting concept too, is that sound is really 50% of the video or film you're watching is sound, and then pictures the other half. So sound has become really, really important. So that sound design tells us where we are. Are we in a big, busy city? Is it kind of scary? Are the sounds off, or are the sounds happy, people laughing? So just those kinds of elements. Do we hear a crow? Do we hear chickadees, right? So the types of birds can create the tone. So we often don't, recognize the ability of sound design to kind of, to help us create these types of tones as well. And that's really interesting to think about. What kind of sounds make you feel different ways? So I always say, crows are often used in the Scary Movie, and again, the bright songbirds will be used in happier things. Like again, the chickadees, or robins and things that sound nicer. So again, blue jays I've used for kind of the thrillers, scarier kinds of things, and that's can be used like that. And then also the bright things, like is it happy, crowded? Is it really empty sounding? So is it very empty? Are there other people in the space? So we can decide the amount of physical interaction that's occurring in that area as well. Then the music, that's another thing too. Horror films again are, you really need that music impacts, those jolts, and versus a musical that might be very happy and uplifting. Music is very different in things that are happier than things that are more sad. So all of that comes into sound design. So really things to think about. Now, it's sound design for video. The next point here is a direct parallel to the video. So what we're trying to do here is we're enhancing the story being told visually with the sound. And it can also be used to further tell the story of what is not shown. So this is where it really can help with independent filmmaking. So we can do things such as showing off-camera actions, or to enhance the settings, such as adding more crowd sounds. So, great idea here as well. If you're in a space and maybe you don't have a lot of background people, you can create a very busy sounding space and not necessarily show the space. We hear this sometimes a lot in films. You hear police sirens, fire trucks to show that we're in a big urban center, but you're not necessarily seeing the fire trucks. We're just hearing that. Putting a distant railway, a train going by. We don't have to film the train, but we can just get that idea that there's a train nearby. Again, it can save on the production, but we can add the sound design in with those kinds of layers of adding in train sounds. A helicopter sound, maybe, we hear helicopters approaching, but we don't have to see the helicopter. So again, really important how sound design can help save on the independent production side by creating more than necessarily what we see. And we can add more depth to a visual that might be a little bit limited, again, on that independent film video side, right? So that's a really great point to think about as well. Okay, so let's continue on. So sound editing essentials. So we'll talk about sound editing first, then we'll get a little bit into the sound design, and then we'll go through a demo of what this kind of means and how we can add things in. Okay, so sound editing essentials. So I put a list together, and again, you can rewatch this through Crowdcast, and we'll post this on YouTube as well in the coming days. So you can always rewatch this. So don't worry about keeping all the notes together. You can rewatch it and pause as you wish to in the future. So sound editing consists of several essentials. So I put a list, and here they are. So number one, cut, is basically just editing out a part of that soundtrack. So just cutting stuff out, removing it. The next one is replace. So this is where we're replacing a piece of the soundtrack with another part from another video take, or another audio take, as I mentioned, that ADR dialogue replacement concept can happen as well. Then we can do stuff that's temporal, so we can increase or decrease the amount of time a soundtrack takes, such as editing music to fit a certain time, or think about sometimes sound effects. It can take a long time for a sound effect to finish. Let's say a car is driving by, so we might need to just edit that so that visually we see the car going by, or maybe in terms of the sound design we want it to be a quick car going by, but the sound effect is maybe a minute. So instead of having it for a whole minute, we can have a bit of the beginning, put a dissolve, like cut out a little bit of the middle, put a dissolve, and that makes it a smooth transition through the audio into the end of it. So that way the car can go by a lot faster. So if it's a minute, we can condense it temporally down to 10 seconds. We can also do an expansion, and that's why I just said temporal, so it's not just a reduction, but it's a reduction or expansion. So we can make music that's a minute, we can loop it, and we can make it longer. We can make it 10 minutes, we can make it half an hour if we need that same music to keep going like a loop. Same with when we get into ambient tracks, we can make backgrounds last for 20-minute scene that might only be 3 minutes of recording. So those are the really fun things that we can do there. Now we can get into enhancement, and that's where we add sounds. So by adding sounds, we can help smooth out the original sound or to help better tell the story, such as sound effects. So that kind of enhancement is, the smoothing out is, and we'll look at that today, is adding ambient tracks. And that can be just background things. And by having background things in picture editing, we might have pieces that are 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 10 frames, all these little cuts, and we might want to smooth it out. So by putting an ambient track, we can smooth it out, because that could be, that could be a 3 to 5 minute track. It can be a 10-minute ambient track. And that way it's continuous and we don't hear any cuts in it, versus the sync sound in the camera might have a bunch of cuts. So by putting these long, I call them bed tracks, the ambient tracks, by putting those underneath and extending them over a rapidly cut video, we smooth things out and enhance things. Same with alternatively, we can take the sound effects idea, and so we might have heard something in the sync sound, like a door opening, but oftentimes the doors are replaced in the sound design, so we can create a certain type of door. So again, what kind of tone is it? Is it a bright, happy sounding door, just a plain doorknob? Is it a creaky old door that sounds like you're entering a haunted mansion? And that's the idea there. Again, the different kinds of tones. Or is it in between? Maybe it's kind of metallic and hollow, and we're going into a lab, and it's like a science fiction thing. So different tones and can be enhanced in the sound effects as well. So we got to think about that. Okay, so that's the sound editing essentials. Those 4 things are really the main ways we're doing sound editing for film and video. Okay, dialogue editing. So what does that mean? Dialogue editing is the process of removing unwanted pauses, mistakes, or background noise from the original sync sound recording. It can also consist of replacing different takes for better performances of dialogue within a different video take. So as I mentioned before, we might use take 3 in take 5. And that use of a different hello could be cleaner. You might get rid of a hit or a pop or a mistake, or a really loud, again, a truck might go by right when the person's saying hello, but in take 3, the hello is clean. So we want to use the take 3 hello, put it into take 5. So that's the dialogue editing. And I think what's important too is the pauses, mistakes, and background noises. Can be a lot of hits. And today we'll look at too is that if you're recording 2 actors, let's say one is like on channel 1, channel 2, or left and right. If actor 1's talking, you're going to have what's called bleed on actor 2's microphone. And what we want to do is usually get rid of all of that. So we have just the clean actor's dialogue, and then we hear actor 2's dialogue, but we don't need to hear the other person's dialogue underneath. And that cleaning is an important part of dialogue editing. Oftentimes we don't have a lot of time to get through all of that, but that's the ideal situation that we can get through that kind of dialogue editing. So, and here again, to define the sync sound recording refers to what is recorded in camera or with a digital sound recorder when recording sound during video production. So I just wanted to define that there so we have a clean definition of what that means. So again, you could be using just the actual camera and putting microphones into your camera that you're shooting with, or you might be using a digital sound recorder. And again, we have both methods are available through the Creator Space and our library partners equipment. So if you just took a camera, you could just attach microphones to it. If you took the sound recording kit, you can take the digital recorder and have what's called double system. So that's the sync sound is still either one. Is the actual sync sound that happens while you're recording picture, and that's because it's synchronized to the picture. So that's your original sync sound. So that's an important definition. Okay, so sound design elements. We have three main elements, and it sounds like there's tons of stuff, but it really breaks down into these three main elements. So we have dialogue, which is again the original sync sound of people talking. So whether that's an interview in a documentary or a drama, the actual dialogue spoken. We have voiceover, or we can have replaced dialogue, such as an ADR, additional dialogue replacement, that happens in a studio. So again, voiceover could be narration, it could be voiceover, explaining what's happening, or you as the director explaining what's happening in a scene. So different types of voiceover. So that's can be a common element. So that's all the dialogue stuff, the spoken word. 2, music. And that means score. So it could be underscore, original score. Usually that kind of score tends to be, if you think more like kind of classical music, that kind of score, the melodramatic type of score, underscore. Then we have what's called source music. And source music can be actual music, so pre-recorded songs. It might be songs that you hear on the radio in a scene. It might be just, you're playing a music piece with lyrics, right? So that kind of source music is available as well. Then we can also have singing. So, we don't want to forget about things like a musical. You might be doing a musical or have singing performances by actors in your film or video. And that could be an interesting aspect as well of having the singing elements. And then 3, so we got 1, 2, dialogue, music, and then finally effects. And that can be sync effects, and that's matching actions directly. So again, a punch would be a synchronized effect. Car door closing would be a hard synchronized effect that, the door closes when you see it closing. Footsteps, synchronized effects, that kind of stuff. Then we have our ambient background sounds. And the ambient background sounds can be just the ambient tracks, like library tracks and the tone. Today we're going to look at a scene that we're going to do that with. It could be the city background sounds, countryside, forest, valleys, anything like that, underwater, any kind of background sounds. And then we finally have Foley or human movement sounds, such as footsteps, doorknobs, handling of phones, all that kind of stuff. So together, these are all referred to as DME. So dialogue, music, and effects. And that's the really cool part of, what it all refers to. And, DME, dialogue, music, effects. So that's your sound design, those elements. Now, in terms of figuring out how you're going to do it, you want to, usually in picture editing, you start to get an idea of what kinds of tone and sound design, what kind of effects you want to be using. And it's a great way to approach it ahead of time, to think about what you're going to do ahead of time and the design of it. So is it going to be a very crowded city? Is it going to be a light sounding town? If, let's say, your film or video takes place, on a street corner, how busy is it going to be? Is the score going to be mysterious? Is it going to be happy, upbeat, quirky? All these kinds of things will lead to the sound design, and it will answer and guide you in the right way that you should be going. Okay, so now let's look at music editing. And that's another thing too, where, just like dialogue editing, music editing is the process of creating a shorter or longer piece of music using existing recorded music. So this can often be created by looping. So we can take parts and like, loop them again and again. And here's where it gets a little tricky. Sometimes you have to look at the bars and counts and try to get the right loop. So it doesn't sound like there's an edit, but that it sounds like it's a continuous piece. So finding a loop can be tricky, and it takes more experience and trial and error before you get the right loop. And it can also be as simple as using the ending of the song to finish the piece. So let's say I have a 5-minute song. I need it to be 1 minute. So I can take the last 10 seconds and edit it into the beginning 50 seconds. And voila, I have a 1 minute piece of music. So that works well. Okay, so the software I'm going to get into now is to demo a little bit of sound editing and design is Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. It's totally free. I'm using version 17 now, which just came out, and it's in a public beta mode. And these will be loaded. 17 will start to get loaded on all the library computers as well. But it is totally free to access, and you can do all your sound work and editing in this free software. I'm going to be using the studio version, and the library computers also have the studio version. Basically what that means is that you get access to higher than 4K 4K resolutions. So the free version will go up to Ultra HD. And then if you need to do beyond that, you have to do the studio version. And there's some effects and some of the fusion, like the After Effects things that are a little bit different in the studio. But for the most part, you can access everything I'm doing today, you'd be able to do in the regular free version as well. So it's available. If you need a computer to handle different resolutions of video, again, please feel free to access the resources available in the libraries. We're really happy to get that available for everyone to use. Okay, so here is my screen of the project. I put a few shots together, about 25 seconds of a piece. And we're going to look at, what can we do with the sound design and edit of this particular piece. And it's always a lot of fun to play with. And let's have a look. So we're just going to look at the plain scene, and then we're going to add a little bit of sound design to it, and just look at those kind of elements. And we'll look at a little bit of dialogue editing, putting a bit of sound effects into it to help the design, and then also a little bit of music. So we'll just put together a sound edit session. So here we go.
Top up. Top up. I'm ready for my library glam day.
Make my library glam day.
Perfect. So that's how we quick little scene, and you can see essentially in here we have track 1, and then we have track 2. So these are the 2 microphones for the actors. So we can actually work on splitting that kind of stuff up. So let's look at what that would look like if we're just going to do a bit of a dialogue edit. So let's just look at that. I'm just going to be using the razor tool and getting rid of some things. So let's start right from the beginning. So the bottom track, right, this one here, track 2, audio 2, is our female actor, and track 1 is our male actor.
Top up.
Okay, so right away, so there's 2 ways we can do the edit. So we can just click on here, we can drag down a volume and turn off track 1.
Top up.
Right, so now we just have the the actor's dialogue here. And then I can just drag these up to increase the volume a little bit. So we're going to do a mixing session in the new year. So I welcome everyone to join us for that. But here in the sound editing, I can just play a little bit with the levels just to make sure I can hear everything well.
Top up. Top up.
All right, so same thing here. So I'm gonna just bring her up a little bit. And this part here, so this little part here, that's the bleed from her into his microphone. So we want to get rid of that because we don't want to hear that. We just want to hear her nice, clean microphone. So I'm just going to lower that down. And by lowering it, it's a quick way to edit, but we can actually retrieve it if we want to bring it back for any reason.
Top up. I'm ready for my library glam day.
Okay, and same thing here. So now let's look at this. I'm going to get rid of this little click. So I'm going to use the razor tool up here. And we have some great tutorials you can get into on Blackmagic Resolve in the editing. So this is just the razor tool, and this lets me get some quick edits out in terms of just highlighting spots that I want to get rid of. And then I'm just going to zoom in so I can use the plus. Right, so look at these clicks here. Right, so what I'm going to do is just lower that. So I've made some edit points, and then I can just kind of lower this down a little bit. Right, so that's one way. I can also hit Command X, or sorry, Command K, and just cut it right out. So that's how we can quickly dialogue edit through here. So let's listen to it now without the clicks.
I'm ready for my...
Okay, so same thing here. So now, again, I can either keep this, or I'm just going to lower it down again.
I'm ready for my library glam day.
Okay, and by keeping those clean, we're getting rid of all those unwanted double up sounds.
Library glam day.
Make my library glam day.
Okay, and so again, now we're going to just keep his track, right? So instead of the one on the bottom, we just want his track up here. So you can see it's like a checkerboard, and that's the beauty of dialog editing. Checkerboarding it through, turning them off, or we can Command K, just suck them right out, cut them right out. But we want to just leave the space so we're not affecting any synchronization. So that's the dialog editing. It's basically a checkerboard between actor 1, actor 2. Now sometimes they might talk at the same time, and that's when you just have to work with the bleed because they are talking at the same time. And we'll get into that in the mixing section as well. So now here's a good example. So what I've done is here's a piece from take 3.
Library glam day.
So it's Library Glam Day. Let's listen to that audio.
Library glam day.
Right, and it's a little bit less distorted than this one.
The library glam day.
See how that's a little bit distorted sounding, right? So what I can do is I'm going to just drag this in right here. So now I'm going to replace take 3 into take 4.
Make my library glam day.
Okay, and that's just solved a big headache. So I've taken the less distorted, better levels of take 3, put them into take 4, because picture editing, we don't want to, picture editing is done. So I'm trying to go with the idea that we're not going to change picture. We like that take, but we just want to get a less distorted take of Library Glam Day in there so that it's not distorted. So that's a great way of doing that dialogue replacement. So we're just getting rid of clicks. We're getting rid of the different microphones. So we just follow our actors' microphones. And then we're replacing different takes. And that is all there is to dialogue editing. The other thing is we can go a little bit even further. And we can actually, drag these things out so that we only hear dialogue. So depending on how intense you want to get with all of the dialogue editing, we can actually, just have dialogue only. And this would be really important. This is a pretty quiet room, but just leaving dialogue only is really important in a space that's very busy and loud. So in this situation, it's not a noisy environment, but sometimes you just need the words if, let's say, it's a very busy street and people are talking, there's cars and stuff. So if you just leave the dialogue, spoken dialogue, it's easier to put in your own trucks and cars to cover the original trucks and cars so that we can have a cleaner sound. And we'll get into a little bit of that too. So let's continue forward. Okay, so now we're gonna have dialogue. Now let's put in a little bit of sound effects. So I pulled some room tones. And let's see what I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna just get a new track, stereo track. Okay, and then what I want to do is stereo track, and this I'm just going to make this call it room tone. And here's some tracks that I have of room tones. So I'm just going to double click. Oh, that's not what you want. So that's library room tone. Here's another one. You can barely hear it. And then here's like a New York library. So these different types of room tones can really create different environments. So let's just take a little bit of this New York tone. So I'm just going to create an endpoint. And you see it's quite long. These are usually a few minutes. And I'm just going to drop it down here into, and I'm just going to pull it out to get right to the whole element. Now in sound editing, we don't have to worry about the leveling because that's where we get into with sound mixing.
Top up.
So you can see how it gets pretty loud. So I'm just going to lower it a bit to like minus 12-ish.
Top up. I'm ready for my library glam day.
Make my library glam day.
Right, so that's what we can do. So now we have, let's just solo that. And here we have just the tone. And I'm going to put another one. Okay, we're going to just make one more track. So I'm just adding some stereo tracks here. And we just want to go in this kind of an order. So I always like to put a little bit of dialogue, a little bit of the ambient tracks just to get an idea of what it's going to be like when it's all combined. And I'm just going to zoom in here. So just plus on the keyboard. Just going to lower that down a bit. And here's a couple room tones now. Let's have a listen. Okay, so now I'm going to just, I soloed them, so we just hear the room tones. Now here it is all together.
Top up. Top up.
Okay, so that's giving us a nice ambient thing. And remember, see now it's smooth. So instead of having all these cuts of dialogue, and there's even that gap where there's nothing, there would be no sound there. But this ambient track that I also like to refer to as the bed track gives us a consistency throughout the whole scene despite all the cuts that are happening. So that we can just keep building that. So we can have multiple room tones and go from there. So now what I want to do is, we have a great example here of just some sync, which is a kettle pouring some liquid. And I have the coffee pouring sound here. Okay, so that's a nice sound. And I'm going to just add another track. You can see we just keep adding tracks. And that's roughly my in point there. Oops, put it on the right one. So I'm going to make it go down here. Okay, let's have a listen. So this is a great example where we need to do a temporal switch. So it starts to pour and we need to have it finish sooner. So I'm just going to put a blade cut here and go kind of in the beginning and end. And I'm just going to slide this up. Command K, just to get rid of that. And there we go. Okay. And here's another fun thing. I grabbed this electric kettle. Like it's just finished boiling. So I'm going to just put that there too. Oops.
Top up.
Okay, I'm just going to put a little bit of like dissolves here. So just kind of like there's, something boiled in the background.
Top up. Top up.
Okay, so just kind of some fun, think of what could be there, right? And then I also grabbed some antacid. Right, so instead of the coffee liquid pouring, we could do something like that. And that could be maybe, for a horror film, maybe there's poison going into the coffee mug instead. So that's, again, where the sound effect can help tell the story differently. Very different than this. Okay, and again, we're not worried about the actual levels here. That's what we're going to get into in the mix, is the actual levels of what's going on. We're just worried about sound editing and then the design of deciding what types of sounds go in here. So the sound editing, sound design, and then next time we're going to get into sound mixing. So we're not mixing, we're just leveling so we can still hear what's going on, but we're not final mixing by any means. Okay, so I just wanted to make that clear. Okay, so now we got all of that in place. We got some couple room tones. We got the coffee pouring. We have the kettle. So again, we keep our dialogue. We did our dialogue editing, fixed that up a bit, replaced a track, right? And we're going to keep going. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another track, stereo track, down here. I'm just expanding these through to make them bigger. So I like to be able to see the wave forms, and that really helps. So the waveforms are visible right down here. By seeing the waveforms, that can really help with our sound editing, so we know what's happening when. So clicks, music, that kind of stuff. Okay, so now I'm going to take this last track here. I'm going to just put some music, and I have a little piece of something fun. Okay, so let's just take it in and out from there, and I'm going to drop it down here. Okay, and I'm just going to level this a bit just so it doesn't overwhelm the dialogue.
Top up. Top up. I'm ready for my library glam day.
Make my library glam day.
Okay. So I'm going to take that end part, okay, and that's kind of where we want it for the music to end.
Make my library glam day.
I'm going to try and have it like end. See right where he does like the whoof. That's kind of fun. Okay, I'm just going to roll this back here and just see how that matches.
I'm ready for my...
Okay, and I'm just using the arrow keys on the comma and period to just nudge left and right. I have it set up that way.
I'm ready for my library glam day.
Make my library glam day.
Okay, and typically music, I usually have music down to about minus 13 to minus 20 if when there's dialogue.
Pop up.
Okay, and that's just so we can hear it. But again, we're just getting the initial design. I just didn't want to overwhelm everything. So let's just give this a listen back now that we've done our dialogue editing. Right, so we have our dialogue editing. We've added some ambient tracks, the bed tracks to unify the whole scene, even though we've cut out parts in the dialogue editing. We replaced the take in the dialogue editing. Then we added some sync sound effects. So we have the liquid pouring. We could be putting some footsteps. So we can just keep adding anything that we feel should be there. We can have, birds outside. We can add all sorts of things to create the sound design of what we want to hear. And then finally, we have our music. And then we have, like the music track. We did a little bit of music editing to, I think it's about a 3.5 minute song. We wanted to make it 25 seconds. So I just dropped the song in, I put the end, and then I roll it back. And that's really a quick way to do some of your sound, your music editing. Okay, so let's give it a playback now from the beginning.
Pop up. Top up. I'm ready for my library glam day.
Make my library glam day.
Perfect. Okay, so that's, essentially we've done our job, right, in the sound editing. So we've done a dialogue editing. We added in the ambient tracks. We created kind of a busier library environment. We added in some of the liquid pouring. That didn't exist. There's no liquid sound, right? So those are those kinds of sounds you want to add in after. And then we added a little bit of music to create this kind of comedy ragtime feel to it. So it creates a certain mood. And again, it could be, we can put something without the music. It's a whole other different mood. So it's always fun to play around with sound in a few ways like that. Let's have a look if we take something that's a little bit more. I'm just going to grab something that's a little bit more like an industrial sounding thing. And how quickly I'm going to copy it over. We'll just grab a couple sound effects that are very different. Right, so that would be very different. And then I'm going to also grab some stuff. These are just different sound effects libraries I have here. And okay, I'm just going to grab some like horror effects. Okay, so let's just make a copy of this. So I'm just going to duplicate the timeline and demo. And now let's make it more into like a horror film. And what can we do with that? So I'm going to take some of this industrial room tones. Okay, so first thing I'm going to get rid of the this room tone and put it into something a bit spookier like that. Okay.
Top up.
Okay, I'm going to get rid of this music. And we'll put a little bit of like kind of a fuzz hum. Here we go. So here's the kind of horror film.
Top up. Top up.
Okay, so let's see how that works. And we'll put that right into our music. So a little kind of instrument swell. So here's the horror film version.
Top up. Top up. I'm ready for my library glam day.
Make my library glam day.
Right, so then we can just, have that swell, if we want it to end, kind of right on his. Right, so all of a sudden, we have this very different. Okay, maybe we'll put that in the beginning here just to kind of.
Top up. Top up. I'm ready for my library glam day.
Make my library glam day.
There we go. So see the same thing, we just totally changed the whole scene and the design by putting in these horror elements. So from the ragtime music to this instrumental swell that's kind of menacing, a little bit of this glass opening, industrial room tone, so there's like nobody else is there, maybe they're alone and it's like a solitary room. So that design is the antithesis of what the first one we did, which was kind of the happier, comedy filled, full library full of life and action, to this kind of what's happening, this thriller horror film, right? So that's how quickly we can do sound design changes. But the dialogue editing would still be the same. So it's more of those secondary things, the ambience, the music, and the sound effects that can be used to change the tone. Okay, so perfect. We got a bit of time here, so I'm just gonna open it up to some Q&A now. So if anybody has any Q&A, let's just see here. So should one define one's sound design before one does sound editing? Yeah, definitely. So if that's the same idea. You want to figure out kind of notes of what you want to do, and how to present it, and make it work to tell the story. So that was the same idea of what kind of music, selecting the music, making design notes. Definitely you'd want to create a plan of notes and how to approach it. Yeah, so don't be afraid to try things. And I always recommend, in sound editing, I will usually put a lot of stuff in there. Options, sound options, Even you can put different take options for the dialogue. You can just have them there and we can just mute them. So you can have multiple tracks, and the more you have, the better, because then you have the options in the mix. So don't be afraid to put in 4 types of liquids pouring, because you might decide that you want, one works really well in the mix and one doesn't. So you don't have to be stuck in the editing and sound of making those final decisions. And that's where the mix comes into place. So I really wanted to emphasize that, is that you can always put 10 ambient tracks, and you might decide that you're going to use 3 or 4 to create the right blend in the mixing. So that's the real fun part. Excellent. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions here. So yeah, you can always email me, tom@tbmcs.ca, if you have any questions. And again, you can access this system, the iMacs, at the Blue Mountains Public Library. If you're a member there, that's available, and we'll have computers come into Wasaga Beach as well. So yeah, here's a question, link of editing and sound resources used for the session. We're going to do that. We're going to have some sound effects and video clips that we'll post. So we're going to create some sessions. So definitely, if you go to our website, sign up for the newsletter, and we'll be posting some of these self-learning sessions in the new year. So we'll definitely post some of that as well. So yeah, thanks again for joining us, and really want to thank our partners in this project. So we have the Canada Council for the Arts and our library partners, Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library. Please feel free to rewatch this, and you can review the slides and the concepts, and the technical is really something that you just have fun with it, and you can't really make a mistake with sound. That's the beauty of sound, is that the mix is where we're going to clean things up, but just play around and see what works, and try different things, and you never know what you can come up with. I always say, remember, in Star Wars, they used elephants for ships, for spaceships traveling, right? So who knows where you can come up with in terms of sound design and to make things work. So once again, my name is Tom Strnad. I'm the lead digital artist of the Creator Space, and want to thank everyone for joining us. And yeah, definitely have a great rest of the day. And thanks for joining us. All the best.